Right, dear conference viewers, we are back again with panel 3. Let us do YIMBY, not NIMBY. Let me translate that for you. So, moving from not in my backyard to yes in my backyard. So this is going to be an extremely interesting and challenging discussion. I'm very much looking forward to it, as are, I believe, many of you on the other side of the screen, as so many questions and comments on the Slido application have been in particularly regarding these acceptance issues, involvement and engagement of local communities in wind industry projects. What sort of benefits can the local communities expect? It even touches upon energy communities and renewable energy communities. So this broad spectrum of issues that these projects face. But before going into introduction of this panel, let me now also let the panelists introduce themselves, and I'll begin with our foreign guest in a few sentences. Jan, please, the floor is yours. Introduce yourself.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me for this beautiful conference today. My name is Jan Hylleberg. I'm the CEO of Wind Denmark. This is a joint association in Denmark for both the wind power industry and turbine owners in Denmark. So we are the voice of wind power in Denmark. Thank you.
Thank you. Alda.
Hello, I'm Alda Ozola, Deputy State Secretary of the Ministry of Environment, Environmental Protection, Regional Development, responsible for climate change policy development and other environmental issues. And of course, wind energy is part of the pathway towards climate neutrality. So,
Andri.
Hello, everybody. I am energy issues advisor in Latvian Municipal Society. Latvian municipalities, they are representing the society, the municipal inhabitants. Thank you.
Thank you. Jani.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jan Slelpēteris. I'm a board member at Latvian Chamber of Commerce and Industry and also a deputy director of policy division there. So what we do in the Latvian Chamber of Commerce is we, on a daily basis, would work with different issues regarding business environment here in Latvia. And as we know, especially for manufacturing industries, the energy question is really important. And on a daily basis, we also discuss about renewable energy and how also the wind energy could help Latvian businesses grow.
Thank you. Thank you for your short introductions, and very briefly in a couple of sentences about, just to add to what has been said already about the social acceptance issues. So the issues, of course, range from absolutely real, palpable, tangible issues like the actual physical presence of wind turbines in the vicinity of hamlets and towns or separate farms somewhere in the countryside. When you have a bigger plans for wind parks, then of course it means that there will be visible changes in the landscape. So not everybody is happy with these situations, and it is very much up to the project developer and to the process of open and transparent environmental impact assessment to ensure that these interests of the local communities and also of the environment and environmental protection are being taken into consideration when developing these projects. And there are many cases, of course, when during these processes of environmental impact assessment, project developers have been directed to make significant changes to the projects to accommodate not only environmental aspects but also the social acceptance aspects of these projects. So there are many things. There is a variety of issues to tackle with this, and in this respect, of course, Latvia is not a unique country. Such processes or environmental impact assessment and also opposition, as well as also support to wind energy from local communities, it is present in all countries where there is wind energy development, especially in areas which are inhabited by people more densely or less densely, but still we have to respect every and each one member of society out there, because it's not something alien. The energy is there for the consumers, so the energy produced by wind farms or wind turbines will be there for the users to use it. It's not for the fun of the business, and it's not only for the profit of business, which is normal, of course, but that's normal for every business. Wind business is therefore no different from other businesses. But often local communities have very much suspicion there. Perhaps occasionally there is lack of complete transparency in the process of developing wind projects. So there are many things on the dish for us to eat and for the developers to eat, and it is up to us to be able to tackle all of these issues. And therefore, going over to Jan, there's going to be now your presentation to highlight maybe the main things we have to keep in mind when thinking about from NIMBY to YIMBY. Jan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Reinis. Once again, thank you for inviting me to give this short introduction. I understood that you would share my presentation, or should I do it from here?
I understand that the presentation shall be on the screen already.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I have brought with me just 3 slides, because I think, Reinis, what is most important here is the discussion in the panel. So I would do it quite quickly. If you share my first slide, just a snapshot over the capacity from wind energy in Denmark of today. Of course, compared to Latvia, we have a longer history in putting up turbines, both onshore and offshore. And you probably is aware of, as also my minister said in the morning, that we have quite ambitious goals in Denmark on the renewable energy side. Therefore, we plan for reaching a situation with more than 100% electricity based on wind power, reaching the years around 2030. That's the yellow line here, showing that that's where we will end. A new analysis from government this week shows that we maybe will be a little bit below 100% in 2030, as it looks like right now. But I'm not in doubt that when we reach 2030, the whole electricity consumption in Denmark will be based on wind power. We have a story where we began back in the 80s, basically even longer, before even back in the 70s, to build wind power in Denmark. And therefore, we have a huge capacity onshore today. You can also see this on the screen here. And we expect to be around 6 gigawatts of onshore wind when we reach 2030. And then since the late 90s, we have established offshore wind on top of the onshore market. So this is the snapshot of how it looks like today. And we are increasing capacity very strongly in Denmark. And that's, of course, due to the CO2 emission reduction targets we have set in Denmark. If you bring the next slides, then talking about not in my backyard, or even yes in my backyard, or you could either use a P, please in my backyard, then what I think is the learnings, at least from Denmark now, is that it's very important that it's local municipalities that have the responsibility. They have to do the planning, and they have to do the necessary approving, because these discussions has been and will be local. The dilemmas, of course, is the balance between knowledge sharing and what do I as a local citizen, what do I as a person feel about wind power? Do I think a turbine is a beautiful infrastructure, or is it ugly and I can't live with it? And then there also is the huge political dilemma, which is a political dilemma in the transition of the energy systems into green, renewable-based energy systems. There will always be a balance between what is the interest of the general public and the nearest neighbors. That's basically, in my view, the most important role for politicians to play to ensure that this balance is right in a given situation. And of course, there will be and has been an increased debate over the green transition. In Denmark today, we not just discuss turbines, we also discuss solar panels. Some neighbors, they even don't think they are beautiful, even that they are not as high and big infrastructure as turbines are. And then I think moving more into the wind power area and having these discussions, which are national discussions. We have always had them in Denmark. Nearly all projects today, very few exemptions, we have a local debate. We have a strong local debate. And it's not easy to make these decisions, but the debate and the dialogue, that's the key. And they're being responsible for planning, being a developer, the social media, the fantastic different platforms for social dialogue has changed some of these discussions, because from a situation where these discussions clearly were local among the developer, the local municipality and the local neighbors, the social media platforms, they have the influence that they are not longer local discussions. You will have people joining the discussion, even not living in the municipality, and maybe even living in another part of the country, joining these discussions because they think it's a wrong way to go. And this can be a difficulty in having these discussions locally, because also in Denmark, we have examples on where the local people and the nearest neighbors, they feel that they don't have a room for a dialogue with the people they want to have a dialogue with. And so that's what basically are the dilemmas. And then if you turn on my last slide, then this is just an overview of some of the different legislative tools we have in Denmark today. And as you also have discussed earlier, there's a huge setup of planning needs and regulatory needs to have a development of renewables in general, and of course also in relation to wind power. And as also I heard Giles Dixon said earlier, there is always something in it for the local municipality. There's always something in it for the local citizens. And again, it's up for the politicians in Latvia to discuss what should this be and how should we organize it. Because there, I think the planning system should have a room for differences across the different countries. Even we have a European directive trying to regulate this across Europe, so we ensure that we build out what is needed and more or less in a similar setup across Europe. But this here I just show you that's what is in the legislation right now in Denmark, and it has been changed several times during the last just 13 years where I have been on board in this sector, and therefore this always will be up for discussion and change over time depending on where you are in the local development in the different market. But I think I will stop it here, and then I will bring it back to you, Heinz, and then I look forward for the discussion in the panel.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Jan. There's definitely many things to discuss. But before going to the questions for the panelists, I want to again address the conference viewers and encourage them to take part in another quick poll on the Slido application. It's about, it is exactly about, well, the yes or no or please in my backyard, and I decided to construct a short poll which would involve different types of technologies that we may wish to have in our backyard. So the question goes, thinking about the large-scale energy generation, I'd rather have a cogeneration plant, wind turbine, biomass power plant, hydroelectric power plant, or nuclear power plant in my backyard. So you have a choice to make here. Please go ahead, and we'll return to the results of this poll towards the end of the panel. But I think this offers you a unique opportunity to choose between something that is real, that exists in real life, and if you had to make a choice, which technology would you choose as the one being somewhere in your backyard? So, without further ado, I'd like to go through the questions for the panelists. And of course, municipalities represent local people there, as Andris correctly said. And of course, the big question therefore is, if there is opposition to wind development in local municipalities, if people are against, do you think, Andris, there is something that municipalities themselves also can do, or what can be done to make wind energy more acceptable in municipalities? A very brief introduction, intervention by you.
I think there are two things. The first homework is for the state. State should discuss. State should offer the projects. State should change the legislation. Sorry, I am pessimist. I think state is doing very small. The next is the municipalities. Each municipalities represent their inhabitants. And for the time being, I'm pessimist. One more time. The discussions, the dialogue between wind energy developers and the inhabitants is very small. Often the wind energy developers are waiting, or how to say, we have a good proposal. Okay, let us to implement this. But the inhabitants have a question: what profit, what good things I will have from this giant wind turbine? Now the wind turbines proposals are 100-meter high. The wind technique develops. And it's like the sun. Sun give for us heat, sun give for us light, but sunlight, each sunlight has shadows. And the inhabitants, if it will be the shadows, what profit, what pluses I will have from this? And these discussions are very, very weak. We should follow and to get the acceptance from inhabitants. The inhabitants should have the results, or it's social. For example, wind turbines, wind energy can give cheap electricity for local firms, for local industries. Yes, it's good. And if such a industry will develop and give working places, okay. But in each case, the dialogue should be strengthened. The variants are different. It is possible to make individual agreements between wind energy developers and inhabitants. It is possible to create energy community. Okay, but the discussions, proposals. Otherwise, it is impossible to go to NIMBY, to YIMBY. Close to my backyard, no, I am not sure. Will the inhabitants have such a giant wind turbine?
All right, Andris, thank you very much indeed. It's actually it casts some light on the problems indeed that we are having. These are real life problems. These are not invented problems. Of course, research shows that there are always also there are not only tangible things that you have to face, but there are also irrational fear or irrational problems that cannot be explained in a simple way, and which require more information from the side of the wind industry, more information, more education, more explaining in more detail what are the effects, possible gains and possible losses for the locals in case wind park, for example, is being developed. So from this perspective, I absolutely understand what you are saying, that yes, if you wish us as inhabitants to give something up, so what do we get as a compensation for that? So that probably summarizes all the things. But now moving over to Alda, what does experience show? Does this non-acceptance stem from these real expected impacts of wind projects, or is it more about irrational concerns?
Well, thank you for the question. And indeed, there are so many different aspects and several layers in this debate. And yeah, there are, well, I cannot provide probably also a straightforward answer, and there is no one right answer to this, because they're really mixed things, meaning that there are really valid concerns of some local inhabitants about their impact on health or well-being related to the flickering effects or other type of effects, and some of them can be addressed by explaining, discussing more through these public meetings that are also part of this environmental impact assessment process. So there are things that can be discussed, explained, and probably that works. However, of course, there are also things where you need to win hearts, not that much minds. It's not that much about rational arguments. What I mean by that is that people are quite sensitive also to the changes of the landscape, and that is something, I don't know if you consider that tangible or not tangible, rational or not, but of course they are used to a certain type of landscape around them, and installing wind turbines or a park, of course that would bring a change. And these wind turbines are getting higher. Well, now we talk already more than 200 meters height. And that people feel emotional about that, and they don't accept the change so easily. And then, of course, there is a question, what is their benefit or what they get in return? And Andris already touched upon that. So there are really mixture of arguments that come up during these public meetings. Of course, as part of environmental impact assessment, the focus lies more on environmental aspects, not that much probably different social aspects, but these are two discussed and really valid questions. And without support and involvement of local municipalities, it's really difficult probably to go through. But I also think that there is a part that the state should play. Well, I think, Reinis, you mentioned that more information should be provided by the wind energy industry. Well, the question is if people really trust it. They think, okay, they are business people. They just want to go ahead with their business idea. So it's also part of our responsibility as Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Economics to explain the role of wind energy in the broader sense, in the context of our pathway and towards climate neutrality. So there are many questions and sometimes no easy answers to them. Yeah.
Yes, it's thank you, thank you, Alda. It's also interesting to see that while being asked what is the attitude towards renewable energy, the population in general, in opinion polls a year ago and also recently at the beginning of this year, the opinion polls show results which are favorable to renewable energy in general. That is in general, but when it comes again to a specific location and specific projects, then it's again the not in my backyard backyard situation, which is kind of a complicated situation. So where is the gap between this generally positive attitude towards renewable energy that is given it does not make energy more expensive than it is currently. So if it makes, if it's at the same level or the energy prices are driven lower, then that's fine. Renewable energy is fine. But then again, how do you turn really this positive attitude into actual action, or intention to act turn into an action? You know, that's a tricky one probably. Jani, maybe you wish to comment also on this issue, and it also concerns, of course, the big energy users. How do they perceive investment in renewables? Is it going to be favorable for energy prices, etc.? Please.
Yeah, thank you for your question. As I already mentioned in the first, in the introduction, I really think that it is a serious concern for the large energy consumers, for the energy to be cleaner, for energy to be cheaper. But I would like to say that the topic of today's discussion, not in my backyard, it's actually not only a problem with regards to wind energy or energy questions. It's actually much broader problem. For example, if we looked at the municipal level of this problem, we see that, for example, we see not in my backyard story at different business situations. For example, I don't know, developments not only of power plants, for example, but also for farming near some, I don't know, some village, for example. So what I'm trying to say is that in some cases, for example, if we look at the farming, for example, the main gains for such a farming development will be for the local municipality. For example, new jobs, bigger economy in the local municipality and things like this. But if we look at the energy policy and wind energy, then we should be looking at it from the national perspective. And I really like how Jan said about involving a lot of more people to discussion. I'm pretty sure that, for example, if we start a discussion about wind parks in Daugavpils, for example, then all of the people from Liepāja and Ventspils, which are on the other side of the country, they would be totally acceptable to the new wind plant on the other part of the Latvia. So what I'm trying to tell, and I really loved how you touched the issue of the information and understanding of the energy issues. So what I would like to point out is that I believe that during the last 10 years we discussed a lot in the society as a whole. We discussed a lot about, for example, media literacy. We discussed a lot about financial literacy, but we don't have a discussion for energy literacy. So namely what I'm trying to say is that we need to gain more understanding of the energy issues in the society as a whole. So namely, this in most cases it touches different social aspects, economic aspects, political aspects regarding transport of the energy from different sources, for example. So I believe that the development of wind energy and development of energetical or energy literacy in the society would really help to develop the understanding that wind energy is probably not the worst thing to develop, and it would actually help us to pay less for the energy, as for the inhabitants, as also for the businesses. The second thing is that we should understand, as I told, the political and economic context of, for example, using different types of energy, and also the environmental context, which, as we know, the wind energy in most cases would be much cleaner than probably other types of energy. So I think that this energetical or energy literacy is actually one of the key aspects for society to be more acceptable towards wind energy projects.
Thank you, Janis. Yes, definitely many aspects to that. But Jan, do you actually somehow relate to the issues that have been raised also by other panelists? What's your experience from Denmark?
I think listen to the discussion in the panel, which is a very interesting discussion. Of course, I can recognize many of the same discussions in Denmark over time. I fully agree with the last comments here about that. The role for Parliament is to ensure that we all citizens in Denmark or Latvia understand why do we transform our society. We have to be carbon neutral, we have to be in alignment with the Paris agreements and these things. And to do so, we have to, for example, in Denmark, we have the very strong discussion about the only way we can do that is that we have to electrify our society. If we have to electrify the whole society, it means the heating sector, it means the industry, it means the transport sector, then we need also at the same time to build new electricity production. In Denmark, the only thing basically being meaningful is wind and then some solar. That's the resources we have. And therefore, when we discuss this as a local level in Denmark, especially these years, I hear younger generations saying we simply have to think global when we act local, because if we turn it opposite, we won't reach the climate targets we have agreed on. We won't save the Earth and for increase in temperature and all these things. And I think that's a very important role for governments. And then, of course, local municipalities, they have the what you would call the concrete role, how to ensure that the local discussions and local dialogues are going the right way. But again, there I think it's important to have one set of discussions about environment and environmental assessment, impacts, and all these things, because again, no one can accept that put a turbine or a park of turbines in the middle of a bird protection areas. Of course, that should not happen. So there should be these overall rules and on environment. And again, as I'm in Denmark right now, we have a very, very strong discussion right in these days about an offshore project which has been developed for 7 or 8 years, where it has shown up that maybe around 4 years ago, the Danish Minister for Environment has put that area on a list for potential bird protection areas without telling anybody that that was the plan. And now it's coming to the public that this project is very close to be built, and it can be built subsidy-free, can't be built. The developer have spent around 20 million Danish kroner on development. And due to that, this area suddenly can be a bird protection area decided by government. This project can't be operating. This has forced a very strong discussion right now that how do we ensure that such a thing can't happen in the future, and how do we ensure that birds nature, sea protection, turbines can coexist. And that's the discussion in the future. So the whole environmental discussions are very important. They are basically regulated by European law. And then you have the social acceptance part. And that's a national, local discussion. And I also agree with what was said before. You will also have a lot of discussion about highways, trains, rails, all these things. They do also create local discussions. So it's not something is only for renewable energy. It's for all bigger changes of our society. But again, if you turn it the opposite way, if we have to go green and we have a green society by 2050, if you can't see turbines, if you can't see solar panels, if you can't see transmission lines, charging stations for electrical vehicles, if we can't see that in the local area where we live, we probably haven't solved the challenge in relation to the climate. We can't go green without we can see it in our societies. And then the final thing, and then I'll go back to airline, is then of course there's the whole discussion about economic benefits, the financing of projects and these things. I would propose try to has this as a separate discussion, because then this is basically a question about how can investors be located, how can they be attractive in relation to do the necessary investments. For example, in Denmark, we have had a political decision years back that all wind should be built subsidy-free. But the list I showed you just before, where they have put a lot of burdens on the economy for doing the projects. Now we are going into this autumn to have some analysis. Have it now been too costly to build wind power at land in Denmark? So we can't have the build out we have planned to have. So I would propose environment is one thing, social acceptance is separate, and then the whole economic discussion. That's the third area where the actors and the player and the political priorities are different. So I can clearly recognize these discussions, and as one of the panelists said before, it's not easy at all.
Oh, thank you, Jan.
And in the end, it will be politicians who have to make a decision.
All right, thank you, Jan. Inhabitants would say it's not up to politicians, it's up to us to decide whether there is going to be a project or not. But that would be the opinion of local municipalities as well, because they, as representatives of local people, they currently also have quite a huge say in the process of accepting or letting the business be developed there. But Alda, you had a comment here.
Well, I wanted to say that I totally agree with what Jan said a while ago about this need for a national debate. Because we indeed, climate neutrality, this long-term vision would bring huge changes to how economy functions, how we generate energy, and how the whole society functions. And we need to not only to show the vision how it can look in 20 or 30 years from now, but also to really have this national debate about what does it mean for economy, what does it mean for employment, jobs, and what is clean energy. I understand also the U.S. administration is now focusing exactly on this economic benefits and jobs part and changing society. Of course, on the other hand, we have, and we will not avoid these local debates, but then there are specific local issues that can be addressed, and the projects can be amended, and these local concerns can be considered accordingly. At the same time, I also understand that while there are, of course, quite rigid rules on where you can build a wind turbine or park, with distances, how far or how close it can be to houses or other properties, But there is more and more interest also, like from state-owned forestry company on building or placing these wind turbines in some forested areas where it's probably of less disturbing impact. However, some people or larger society still would also have opinion that it also changes landscape, and do we need that or not? So many questions.
Yeah, I believe that there are many more questions than really clear answers to those, but there are also many answers to these situations. But just before going and asking question to Andris about municipalities and what could be done, what sort of should be top 2, 3 priorities? What should municipalities gain from wind power projects? I just want to remind those who are following the conference that there is the Slido poll open still. Of course, some of the watchers have actually noted in the Slido timeline that there is a problem that the organizers have forgotten to put the solar photovoltaic electricity as an option for choice. But yeah, I have to admit this. Well, I forgot about it. I really noticed it once you really mentioned that, and I'm not sure how many of the current voters for other type of choices would switch over to solar photovoltaic in my backyard if they would have to choose. But I believe there probably would be choices also in favor of solar photovoltaic, and therefore maybe less support to wind turbines, but that's only my interpretation. So sorry for not putting solar photovoltaic there, but still I think there is a fair selection of other technologies to choose from. So Andri, what if you would have to say what are main 2 things that should be there for municipalities to be more accepting towards the wind energy?
No, in general, I would say it would be very good if the energy societies will be erected, energy communities, and the energy communities becomes cheaper electricity directly. It's not a simple question, I agree. For inhabitants, it would be cheaper electricity. It would be a possibility to erect industries, smaller or bigger industries who gets cheaper electricity from wind turbines. Of course, it needs cables from the wind turbines to the industries. So in general. But what I would say once more, we need in Latvia deep discussions in state level and in municipal level. In state level, the legislation and discussions and propaganda, may say, why wind energy is good, why wind energy is acceptable, why wind energy can give profit to the inhabitants in different ways. The ways are different. We can have direct agreements with inhabitants. No, I don't believe this YIMBY, the acceptance of wind turbines in my backyard. No, I don't believe.
You think there ought to be some sort of real financial benefit from the project?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's a clear message, and it's of course not the first time that that we see that some sort of tangible benefit to the community might be something that the community expects. But of course, there is a variety of different solutions. As you also mentioned, energy communities, they could become part of the project. perhaps that's one possibility. Jani, maybe you see a possibility. Do you see a possibility for industry clusters around these wind parks, for example? If you have a wind park which produces sizable volumes of electricity, do you think that might also foster some sort of clustering around these areas?
Yes, actually, I think it's a pretty good idea, and such a clustering, as you say, it might bring the necessary understanding of how wind energy could help businesses. For example, I would say if we would try from, for example, large energy policy point of view to start with such a one cluster, for example, in one part of Latvia, I would say that that would help to create this understandings throughout different parts of country. So I would say that I would think that discussion on such an idea would be really great, and I think that the results could be really good. And I think that actually one thing is that businesses actually can help explaining situation to also to general public. So what I'm trying to say is that these, for example, if I don't know, for example, 10 businesses make such a cluster in near town of near city of Liepāja, for example, then I'm totally sure that during couple of years or a specific period of time, there would be a much larger debate on the local community about how wind energy helps the business in a specific cluster and how this could help the society as a whole. So I think, yeah, that would be like a great pilot project, actually.
Right, Jani, just to add, and we're we're moving closer to the end of the panel. What would be your top 2 things that you would try to enact if you would have to somehow positively influence the acceptance of wind energy in municipalities? Yeah,
I would say that the first thing, still from my perspective, is the energy literacy, as I give this term to this idea. So what I'm thinking is that we still need to explain how wind energy works and how alternative energies works and what are the benefits if we look at the situation we are in right now. I think this is one of the most important things. And second thing I would say is state policy that which is made on the basis of, for example, carrot and stick policy. For example, giving some carrots in most cases will give a good boost for a new idea to start working in a right direction.
Jan, if you would have to prioritize and say, what are the top 2, 3 things that you would do to encourage municipalities or acceptance among municipalities?
I think number 1 priority is the overall acceptance of in Latvia in general that this is a need to go green. Based on that, I think it must be local dialogue, local planning, being out early in the discussions about where in the local municipality could we foresee solar panels, turbines, and then do the planning from there. And then the earlier the dialogue with local people can be taken, the better. So transparency in what are the need, the plans, and where and how do we like to build these projects here locally. And then there, just a short comment to what you said before, Ryan, is, of course, me being a neighbor to something I doesn't like, I would like to have my own veto right. But if all of us have a veto, we just export the challenge to our neighbor municipality or neighbor country. So that's the difficulties, and that's why I said that in the end it is politicians who have to decide what are the targets and what do we do here locally. Nobody else, in my opinion, can make these decisions. That's what democracy is about.
Right. Andri, yes, brief comments, yes.
Underline once more. Dialogue, dialogue, dialogue.
Okay.
Agree. In fact, I had a question to Jan.
Yeah, go ahead. Why not?
If that's okay. Has the aspect that Denmark has been a producer, one of the leading ones in overall of wind turbines, has helped to gain this social acceptance nationwide, or because that generates employment, economic benefits for the whole country? Has that played a role?
Of course, that has made a difference in some discussions historically. In the municipalities where there has been and still are some big workplaces in this sector, of course there is historically there has been another dialogue in these municipalities, but in the municipality in Denmark of today, where Vestas, world's biggest turbine manufacturer, is living, right now there's a very strong discussion about that. Are there turbines enough, and can there be more? So I think it's part of the discussion. Today we have not discussed offshore. For example, in the offshore discussion, there's a lot of local jobs around harbors and installation and these things. So of course the possibility of having local jobs also was you discussed before about industrial clusters. That's what we discuss now in Denmark in relation to power to X hydrogen. Where can we mix, where can we do this sector coupling? And there, of course, again, it's a question about jobs. And in our local municipality, we do not just produce electricity, we do also produce hydrogen or ammonia or whatever we will end up producing based on electricity. So it plays a role, but the more developed an energy system you have based on renewable energy, you will end up having the discussion about social acceptance all over the place, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Jan and Alda. If you would be the one to decide what would be top 2-3 things that you could offer municipalities and local residents.
Well, I totally agree about the need for dialogue, as previous speakers, panelists have also highlighted that is absolutely necessary. Dialogue between municipalities and citizens, dialogue between state-level institutions and municipalities and citizens, so dialogue. The second, I would say that there should be clear, transparent, trusted information ensured, so that what Ministry of Environment and its subordinated institution, State Environmental Bureau, who is overseeing environmental impact assessment processes, so has to make sure that the information provided by, on one hand, by the wind energy promoters, on the other side, the questions that are asked or debated or discussed by citizens or other stakeholders is fair. And so that there should be this trust building, and the state, certainly, state institutions has a role to play there. And last, probably a bit more funny remark, it's, I think from our experience, it's strongly advisable not to have these local discussions and heated debates right before local elections, because that does not end well.
All right, yeah. Well, thank you for your very interesting contributions here. Obviously, still the questions remain, and there's no one golden solution there. There's a complex of issues. There's a portfolio of activities that you have to carry out from the side of the state, from the side of the municipality, from the side of the developer and the investor. So probably the answer is there's no single correct answer, so it might also be different from place to place. But returning back to the Slido poll, which regrettably didn't offer the solar photovoltaic option, I must emphasize once again, but still out of those choices that we offered, perhaps we can put the results on the screen, the Slido poll on choice of energy technologies. So in words, there have been 62 votes. Majority were in favor of wind energy, then followed by biomass power plant, hydroelectric power plant, cogeneration plant, natural gas, and nuclear power plants. So I do not know whether this can be considered representative, but I think it indicates at least slightly that depending on how polluting or how risky the technologies might be, the answers have been provided here. So nuclear power plant, nobody would like. Who would like to have nuclear power plant in the background? Not me, really. So, but although I have to admit that in the timeline on the Slido, we had several people pointing out that nuclear energy might probably be a good alternative for other non-emitting, non-CO2 emitting technologies, but that's very expensive, I should assure you. On this note, let me thank again our panelists, Jan in Denmark, Janis, Andris and Alda in our studio, and thank you for following this, and looking forward to the last panel, which will speak about integrating wind energy with hydrogen technologies, which could serve as accumulators for the wind energy, which is probably not usable at the time when the wind is blowing too strongly. So we can accumulate that and use that. But prior to that, we still have a video and a short technical break. So thank you once again, and we'll see you in a moment.